Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez appealed to Europe's solidarity and calls for a common migration policy. Is compulsive video gaming a mental disease or a symptom of other problems? We'll explain. And World Cup fever sweeps the continent. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is appealing to Europe's solidarity and called on a common migration policy. This comes shortly after Spain agreed to allow safe harbor to the rescue ship Aquarius to dock at their ports. The vessel had been adrift carrying 629 migrants following the refusal of Italy and Malta to allow the charity-run vessel into port. The number of people fleeing poverty and conflict by boat to Spain doubled last year and is likely to rise again in 2018, according to the EU Border Agency, potentially pushing migration up the national political agenda. Sanchez told Spain's public broadcaster TVE in his first interview since he was sworn in that he would be raising the issue of migration when he meets French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris this weekend. Adding he will also be meeting Angela Merkel in Berlin and Antonio Costa in Lisbon.
What does the Spanish government have to do? What the Spanish government has to do is call on the solidarity of the European Union. This policy can only be resolved from an EU perspective, with a common migration policy, with a common border policy, and Frontex is there for that, and also with a common integration policy and refugee and asylum policy.
Prime Minister Sanchez says it was not his intention to open the borders, but rather to manage migration in a way that guarantees human rights. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, has accused governments in many rich countries of adopting a despicable rhetoric on migration, as many ignore their duty to help people fleeing war or persecution. Grandi says economic migrants have different rights and needs from people fleeing war and persecution, but they were often viewed the same in the eyes of the public, which saw them as a threat. Some poorer countries had gone beyond their international obligations by accepting huge numbers of refugees, while rich countries in Europe, as well as Australia and the United States, no longer stand up for refugees like they used to. Grandi says this sets a negative example for poorer countries who wonder why they should bear the burden. On the eve of the World Refugee Day, the United Nations says a record number of people, over 68 million, were refugees or internally displaced in 2017, nearly 3 million more than in 2016. One of every 110 people in the world is a refugee, and more than 16 million were forced from their homes for the first time last year, an average of 44,000 daily, while 70% of all refugees come from just 10 countries. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, says solutions to the conflict in those countries would go a long way to reduce the record number of displaced people. Now, Ethiopia's foreign ministry says South Sudan President Salva Kiir is set to meet opposition leader Riek Machar in Ethiopia on Thursday as part of talks to negotiate an end to a 5-year-old civil war. Machar has been held under house arrest in South Africa since late 2016. Foreign ministers from the East African bloc, IGAD, will then discuss South Sudan thereafter, followed by a leaders' gathering in the Ethiopian capital. Fighting first erupted between troops loyal to Kiir and forces supporting Machar, when then vice president, in December 2013, just 2 years after South Sudan's independence from Sudan. The ethnically charged conflict has killed tens of thousands of South Sudanese people. A series of ceasefires and pacts have failed. The U.S. President Donald Trump is doubling down on his zero-tolerance policy on illegal immigration, a crackdown that has led to at least 2,000 undocumented children being separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border. As VOA's Michael Bowman reports, human rights advocates and lawmakers of both political parties are outraged, sparking action on Capitol Hill.
Once rare, but now routine, separating undocumented minors from their parents and holding them at an array of facilities near the border while their legal cases go forward.
This is not the Texas I know. This is not the America that I grew up in.
The latest manifestation of the Trump administration's determination to hold, adjudicate, and deport undocumented immigrants and to raise the bar for asylum seekers at the border has sparked a backlash. But Trump isn't backing down.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be.
The administration insists it is merely closing an immigration enforcement loophole, saying past administrations gave preferential treatment to undocumented immigrants with children.
Word got out about this loophole, and the results were predictable. The number of aliens illegally crossing with children went from 14,000 to 75,000 in just 4 years, a 5-fold increase. This cannot continue. We cannot and will not encourage people to bring their children or other children to the country unlawfully by giving them immunity.
Trump has repeatedly blamed Democrats for Washington's decades-old paralysis in addressing immigration. Now Democrats and a growing number of Republicans are in fact banding together, but in fierce opposition to family separation. Republican Senator Ben Sasse called the policy wicked and harmful to kids, adding, quote, "Americans are better than this."
What we're doing as a nation is inflicting enormous harm on these kids and on the parents when it's totally unnecessary during this time when they're waiting for their asylum hearing.
Senate Democrats introduced a bill prohibiting family separation except when a child's welfare is at risk. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives votes this week on 2 Republican bills that would overhaul America's immigration system and boost border security. It is unclear either bill can pass the chamber. Michael Bowman, VOA News, the Capitol.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. You're watching Africa 54. In a moment, the controversy over the potential health impact of compulsive gaming. But first, here's a look at Tuesday's headlines.
And that's the beauty of coming to court.
It's time for Health Report, and today we will talk about gaming addictions. Parents suspicious that their children may be addicted to video games now have support from health authorities. The World Health Organization has listed gaming addiction as a disorder. It is a new mental health problem that is on its 11th edition of International Classification of Diseases released on Monday. But as VOA's Latika Hoke reports, not all psychologists agree that compulsive gaming should be on that list.
Video game producers strive to create games that keep fans engaged and wanting more. Many young people gradually become so hooked to video gaming that they cannot stop playing to do more important things in life. Canadian Cam Adair was one of them.
Originally, when I started gaming, it was fine. You know, I was a healthy kid, happy kid, played hockey, but eventually it began to become a problem, and I actually ended up dropping out of high school not once but twice, never graduated. Never went to college, and got to a point where I was pretending to have jobs, playing video games up to 16 hours a day.
Experts say the symptoms are similar to alcoholism and drug addiction.
Gamers, texters, kids that are doing reading and watching YouTube videos get this dopamine release. When it stops abruptly, like when a parent or there's a time they have to stop, they really experience almost spontaneous withdrawals.
But some experts reject the idea of classifying excessive video gaming as addiction. They argue that people often resort to video games to fight anxiety or depression, and that kids are more likely to get hooked to games if they lack social skills. When those primary issues are resolved, the need for gaming declines, they say. Cam Adair sought professional help after becoming suicidal.
It's actually about understanding how these games are designed and why they do hook you so much, what human needs they fulfill for you.
Adair welcomes the WHO decision for raising awareness of the problem so it can be treated. The Cyber Addiction Recovery Center in Los Angeles offers assessment and treatment for technology addiction, which includes video gaming, social media addiction, phone addiction, and cyber pornography addiction.
We work with kids as young as 5 and all the way through the teenage years and into adulthood.
Christopher Mulligan, the center's founder, says addiction to technology cannot be treated in the same way as alcoholism or drug addiction.
They're going to have to get back online eventually. They're going to have to use their computers. They're going to have to use their phones. So it's really teaching this very challenging goal of sustainable relationship to technology.
The World Health Organization says classifying gaming disorder as a disease will help member nations recognize the problem and prepare ways to treat it. Zlatitsa Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Now, the United States Agency for International Development just released its Acting on the Call report, assessing the agency's ambitious efforts to save the lives of 15 million children and 600,000 women by 2020. Every year, over 300,000 women die globally, and 1 million newborns die on the first day of life. USAID's efforts in maternal and child survival focus on 25 priority countries. Uganda is one such country. Joining us in the studio for more is Dr. Jessica Nsugwa Sabiti, a trained pediatrician and the Commissioner of Maternal and Child Health with the Ministry of Health of Uganda. Dr. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So the country has taken on a program that was started by USAID. But before we get to that, let's talk about where the country was before in terms of maternal and children's health. What was the landscape like?
Yeah, just like many low-income countries, Uganda is one of the countries where we have a lot of preventable deaths, despite the human development which has occurred and the political will, for that matter. We still experience many avoidable deaths for mothers and children with a lot of focus in the rural areas.
So now the Acting on the Call report, which is a report released by USAID, talks about different progress made and perhaps some challenges remaining. With regards to Uganda, what can you tell us in terms of the progress that have been made since the implementation of this program?
Having realized this big challenge and gap, Uganda worked with the partners, and in particular the USAID, to develop a model. Just like you have any new product, we tried out this model to see whether it was workable. But most importantly, we wanted to know whether it can actually rapidly reduce mortality. And after 1 year, we were able to reduce maternal mortality, maternal deaths by 30%. And that model has since been benchmarked to include in our new sharpened plan for women and children's health in the country.
And that's the Saving Mothers Giving Life partnership that we're talking about.
Yes, yes.
So what was what were some of the lessons learned when you implemented it in some of the districts that prompted you to really make it a national plan now?
One of the different things about this unique model was the fact that we are able to converge health system strengthening interventions. And this was a proof of concept. The first time we're doing it to bring every component which can deliver these interventions. And we've been able to learn some important lessons from this experience.
Such as?
We've learned that one of the important ingredients in this process is to focus on the health systems, to ensure that the infrastructure is present, the commodities and supplies are present, the human resource is present, not only in adequate numbers, but also in the right places. We've been working together with the USAID and other partners to make sure that actually we can motivate these health workers to work in these difficult situations. We've also been working on the demand side activities to make sure that mothers come to the facility to access these facilities. We've been able to count the number of deaths and be able to analyze, to understand why these mothers are dying through a process called the road to death. And through this road to death process, we've been able to understand that problems begin right from the home, underprivileged families, right to the process of deciding to seek care. And even when they seek care, there are delays in the health facilities. Yes. And therefore, we've been able to target different interventions to address these problems. And we're very excited about this partnership. And currently, the government has made a decision to scale up this program and to mobilize resources, and also in particular to align partners to focus on this approach.
Now, one of the critical aspects of implementing programs, and you talk about mobilizing resources, is funding. So I see in the Acting on the Call report, which is this document, that local councils have increased their contribution to health funds. Can you tell us more about that?
One of the things we did, because we were able to count the deaths and discuss the causes of death, we've been able to mobilize the political leadership to understand and take up more ownership. We've increased the voices of people who can advocate for women and children's life. The Parliament, in particular, has been very central in pushing for the budget increase. Not only have we been able to mobilize resources from external partners, but the domestic funding is also increasingly rising over the years. We've been also to actually use this experiment or proof of concept to demonstrate and justify the money we negotiate from the Ministry of Finance.
So is this the same when you talk about the Women and Children's Sharpen Plan?
Oh, yes, the Sharpen Plan for Women and Children's Health.
Okay, tell us just a little more about it before we wrap.
This plan is basically around a model which emphasizes a common plan, a common monitoring system, and a common focus on priorities the government has chosen. Previously, we had different mechanisms and uncoordinated, fragmented processes. Through this government-led plan, partners are able to know where to invest most, but not only to invest most, but we are also focusing on things which can reduce mortality very quickly. So we've been able to select those processes and also introduce some very important shifts strategically. We want to go where the death happens most. We want to target the population which is burdened most, but also want to make sure that we can account for the results and also make sure that we have a cross-sectoral approach. So through these new shifts, we have been able to convince partners to put their effort together. And we're also measuring the results together. We are using data to drive the process and also sharing the data with everybody so that everybody can visibly see where we are going.
Dr. Sabiti, thank you so much, and good luck in continuing this great program.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And that's Dr. Sabiti. She's Commissioner of Maternal and Child Health with the Ministry of Health of Uganda. Now, the Central American nation of Costa Rica is among the tropical countries in the world that has a very high concentration of snakes. 20 of the country's more than 130 species are among the most poisonous. VOA reporter Jacopo Luthi traveled to Costa Rica to report on the work of a research institute that produces the snake bite antidotes, which in many cases are the only things that make a difference between life and death.
Costa Rica's Clodomiro Picado Institute produces antivenom serums to counteract snake bites for use in Central America and elsewhere.
What makes the production of antivenom serum complicated is that the snake venoms vary according to the region. So, antivenom or antivenom serums have to be specific for countries or regions.
Estimates vary, but at least 20,000 people die from snake bites every year, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. To make the antidotes, the poison is extracted from the snakes manually by massaging the snake's head and collecting the fluid in a flask.
Here is all the venom.
In this room are some of the most dangerous snakes in the world. They could kill any adult within a few hours, so extracting the venom is a delicate process.
Exacto, en el momento en el que se pierde el respeto.
When you lose the respect and fear of the snake, that's when accidents can happen.
The other part of making the serum involves horses. One of the veterinarians at the institute explains that horses produce antibodies to the venom in their blood, which is extracted from antivenom serum production. Researchers say this process is not painful for the animal.
Básicamente es por facilidad de manejo.
They handle themselves quite well. They learn to work. They get used to the work. And also because we can get large quantities, large volumes of blood, for profitable production.
Grandes para que sea rentable la producción.
The production of antidotes is no easy task, but at the Clodomiro Picado Institute, the search for new cures against snake bites never stops. Jacopo Luzzi, VOA News, San Jose, Costa Rica.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thanks for sharing the snakes and thanks for being here. Be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday and Thursday on Africa 54. Well, Senegal's President Macky Sall arrived in Russia on Monday to support the national soccer team as they take on Poland Tuesday in the World Cup. Egypt, Nigeria, Morocco and Tunisia all lost their first-round World Cup matches. Senegal is hoping to secure Africa's first win in the 2018 World Cup. Back home in Dakar, World Cup fever is high, and according to vendors at the Sandagar market, business is booming. Jersey, flags and other articles related to the Senegalese team are selling very well. Speaking to VOA, two market vendors shared the excitement of Senegal being in the World Cup.
We are selling quite a lot of jerseys, you know. We exhibit our articles and everything is in green, yellow, and red, and are hoping for a victory. We believe we can win.
Oh yeah, the jerseys are selling very well. The jerseys and the caps. And if the team wins, it's gonna be even better. The better the team does, the better it will be for us. We won't even have a jersey around. I hope we don't lose, because if we win, business will be even better than during Eid celebrations.
Well, President Sall was invited to the World Cup by FIFA Secretary General Fatma Samoura, who is also from Senegal. Now, this year's World Cup is in Russia, the most expensive ever, with an official price tag around $15 billion. The results: several huge new stadiums, railroad and upgraded airports, plus the chance to reboot Russia's global image. So will the tournament represent a good value for Russians? As Henry Ridgewell reports from Moscow, the government appears to have used the World Cup to bury some bad economic news.
Officially, Russia has spent close to $3 billion on 12 new or upgraded stadiums. At least another $8 billion has been spent on infrastructure. But was it good value for the money?
The discussion of the efficiency of the championship in Russia, like in Brazil, is the discussion of economic efficiency of a wedding dress. On one hand, it's necessary. It makes everybody happy. The exact economic efficiency definitely cannot be defined in American quarterly financial reports. It's a long-term story. We still hope to become not only hockey country, but football country.
Brazil hosted the last World Cup in 2014 at a cost of $11 billion. 4 years later, many of their travelling fans feel shortchanged.
Comparing Brazil with Russia, the infrastructure here is much better than ours.
This is the biggest number of tourists that Moscow has ever seen. And in total, they're doubtless spending billions of rubles having a good time. But after they've all gone home in 4 weeks, Russia hopes there will be a longer-term benefit to hosting the World Cup.
The $15 billion investment is aimed at giving Russia an image makeover in the eyes of the world, even as it faces sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine.
Putin, with all this strength, pretends that all that is not important for him. Despite sanctions, we conduct such a gorgeous World Cup. Despite sanctions, we go ahead with the war in Syria, and the world has no right to lecture us. And the people enjoy that until the very moment that they start feeling that for all this pleasure, they are paying out of their own pockets. It is right now that they start feeling that.
First to feel it are the middle-aged. On the opening day of the World Cup last week, the government announced a gradual rise in the pension age from 60 to 65 for men and a bigger jump, 55 to 63 for women. 62-year-old Eva says most Russians are taking it in their stride.
It wasn't really unexpected. Probably they thought the championship, the euphoria, will somehow smooth out the effect. There was a joke going around. Yesterday I had 4 years until pension age. Today I have 9 years. And they keep telling us that you can't get your youth back.
Russia says the World Cup is partly a gift for its youth. Unforgettable memories and glittering new facilities. The tournament finishes in a month. Its legacy will be measured in the coming years. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, Moscow.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Chinese e-commerce giant JD.com has secured investment worth $550 million from Google as part of a new strategic partnership between the two leading tech companies. The two companies will jointly explore retail business in regions around the world, including Southeast Asia, the United States, and Europe. The bilateral cooperation will combine the advantages of JD.com in supply chain and logistics and Google's technology strengths. JD.com also plans to make a selection of products available for sale through Google Shopping in multiple regions around the world. Well, and in other tech news, technology companies are racing to develop ultra-precise digital maps that can guide self-driving cars within inches of where they should be. Developers say better maps will help the auto industry deliver on its promise of widespread use of driverless vehicles. Data is collected by special vehicles carrying sensors and cameras. Starting in November, Japan will also get positioning information from its government satellites. And that's what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. So, you know what happy is, and medium comes between small and large.
To find a happy medium.
So, is this idiom about feeling kind of happy?
How is it going with your neighbor? Is he still complaining about your playing the trombone at night?
He was, but it's fine now.
How did you guys work